Welcome to Mining 901, and today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Mr. Warren Beech, the CEO of Beech Veltman Inc. Without exaggeration, he's simply the finest practitioner of mining law I've encountered. With nearly 3 decades of specialist expertise, Warren's insights into mining, natural resources, and infrastructure law are unmatched. Warren, welcome to Mining 901. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Navarengwe. Thank you.
Maybe to get us started, can you tell us briefly about your journey into mining law?
Bottom line is I never intended to be a mining lawyer. It was something that almost happened to me in which I had to lean into and embrace over a very long period. I simply needed money. I needed money to go and study. I'm going to Wits and I needed a job, but I ended up working underground in the afternoons, in the evenings, public holidays, Christmas, etc. to make money. So I fell into it. When I finished my last shift underground, I came up on the 23rd of December 1990 and I said, well, thank you very much, colleagues and friends. I'm now going to be a lawyer. Have a nice life. And again, like most things in life, when you say things like never again or never to me, that's when life comes and says to you, we've got other plans. And the plan for me was to get into mining law. Ended up in a law firm, Norton Rose now, but tenacious rates back then. And my principal at the time shouted down the passage and said to me, Beech, come here. You know something about mining. I believe you worked underground. And it was just at the start of the Leon Commission on Mine Health and Safety. I've had some incredibly supportive people over that period that looked after me, mentored me, and gave me the opportunities. But I fell into mining law and then, as I said, have had to embrace it over the years.
Recently, we've seen the Minister of Mineral Resources who intends to introduce the Mine Health and Safety Amendment Bill. Can you unpack what this amendment bill means for mine houses? What can they expect?
The amendment bill, which has been published and gazetted and will be introduced in Parliament at some stage this year, is going to introduce the biggest amendments and the broadest amendments to the Mine Health and Safety Act since it came into force in effect in 1997. There were initial changes, small changes, and along the way there have been changes, particularly to the regulations. But this is a complete amendment to the Mine Health and Safety Act. They're the most far-reaching amendments, and they're really focused on a couple of important points. Number one, making sure that health and safety is improved through training. And the changes around training include specifically that there's no qualification at the moment. Mining companies must provide training to the extent reasonably practicable. The changes are going to make training absolute requirement, and it's focused on making sure that people working on the mines understand what they're being exposed to and how they can address it. So typically, it's very extremely unusual when we're doing compliance audits, or in the worst case scenario, when we're doing fatal inquiries following an incident, that you can prove necessarily that a training program was followed, that the person was assessed, that the person was found competent, and therefore was able to do their job safely. It's often very difficult to connect those dots. So the first major changes are around training. The second set of changes are around enforcement, increasing and improving the ability of the Mine Health and Safety Inspectorate to enforce the Mine Health and Safety Act. Not that they don't have those powers now, they've got extremely far-reaching powers. And if you talk to any mining company and you mention the infamous Section 54 instructions, every single person will know what a Section 54 instruction is. It's a stop instruction that the inspectorate issues to stop the mine or a portion of the mine until something is being addressed. So there are very good powers and functions built into the current version, but they are being enhanced so that if an inspector believes that something's going to be tampered with, they can literally come bring a chain and a lock and put it around your gate and chase you away. So it's improving and increasing those enforcement provisions of the Mine Health and Safety Act. And then thirdly, it's improving or increasing the consequences. So the perception at the moment is that the consequences are not harsh enough, and therefore the mining owners and the mining companies and the mining CEOs are not taking it serious enough, and they're improving or increasing those consequences. At the moment, you can be prosecuted, but again, capacity within the National Prosecuting Authority sometimes makes that quite difficult. There are administrative fines that can be imposed. Those are being imposed, but the perception is it's not harsh enough. And one of the major changes is that when fines, not administrative fines, criminal fines, are going to be imposed in future, it will be up to a maximum of 10% of the company's turnover or the value of its exports, whichever is higher. So it's going to hit the bottom line. The theory is that the shareholders will stand up, take notice, and say if you're going to affect turnover and you're going to pay fines based on turnover, and in that way try and improve health and safety. Obviously, a whole lot of changes that are aligned with those, but those are the three big areas of change that will be coming when the bill comes into force in effect.
If I'm a CEO of a mining company and I know that these changes are coming, in your view, are there maybe things that I could be doing today just to prepare my business in anticipation of the new bill?
The most important thing for any CEO or for any executives in a mining company is to understand what's coming around the corner. That is the most important thing. You have to anticipate changes. If you sit and you put your head in the sand and don't understand that changes are coming, that is a problem. And that means that the team around that executive group must keep them up to date on what is going to be coming around the corner. Here, what we've been doing is sitting with the executives, sitting with the boards. We've been taking them through the changes that are coming in detail. We've prepared workshops and we sit and go through a couple of important points. One, that you have to have a multidisciplinary team looking at these changes. You can't isolate it with health and safety team members. They have a perspective, but not all the perspectives. Everybody from procurement through to HR, through to ER, through to community engagement, community liaison have to be involved. The second most important thing is obviously you can't sit around and just talk about these things. You have to understand what the changes are. You have to understand what the consequences are, and you need to manage that, put together a proper route map, allocate responsibilities and resources to do that. The other change that is coming along with the amendment bill is the changes to the appointment structures. The appointments which have been currently made and which have been made for many, many years, because the appointments are in 3 different provisions of the MHSA. Those are going to be consolidated under Chapter 2, and that will also need to be worked in at some point to make sure that that project is also dealt with timelessly.
In South Africa, we talk about mining aspects quite a lot. How would you characterize the current state of the South African mining sector?
South Africa, like almost every country or every mining jurisdiction in the world, is facing headwinds at the moment. Global uncertainty with everything that is going on is affecting us, like it is most mining jurisdictions and countries that make use of the minerals. So we're in a very difficult position generally as a mining jurisdiction. Of course, we've got unique challenges in South Africa. Our diplomatic relationships, and we don't need to get into that, are not at the best at the moment. And there's always the usual suspects. It's regulatory uncertainty because the regulatory side is not necessarily clear, or it's inconsistent, and then depending on who you speak to, there's different interpretations within the regulators about what is required and what isn't required. But at the moment, it's the global uncertainty that is affecting us most. Obviously, our exchange rate is affecting us. It makes things incredibly expensive to buy. The fact of the matter is local government is not doing what it should, and the mines are seen as proxy municipalities, proxy service delivery entities, and the demands from the communities are about jobs, it's about roads, it's about network, it's about data and everything that goes with that. So it's a proxy municipality, and the mine's been put in that position. So fairly unique socioeconomic situation, and of course that's led to the illegal mining scenario, which makes it incredibly challenging. So general headwinds, general challenges, but also very unique challenges in South Africa.
I'm wondering, Warren, what would you say are some of the key strategies that you recommend to mining companies to be able to effectively manage some of the legal and regulatory risks that you are seeing?
So the first, probably the most important, is a lot of our investors are offshore investors. And what informs decision making in an investor country isn't the same as what informs investment and responses in South Africa. So the first very clear message is don't be arrogant. Do not try and impose what you think is an appropriate landscape or manage your expectations properly when you come to South Africa. Number 2, understand the landscape. Always look after people. Get to understand the role players, the stakeholders, and understand how important the stakeholders are. We keep on mentioning communities because they have become one of the most important stakeholders. A community can stop your mine. It could prevent it from being started up. It can destroy your mine if that relationship is not managed properly. And we've had, unfortunately, a long history of investors coming into South Africa trying to impose what they think is a model that works in their home country but doesn't work in South Africa, and either end up losing millions and millions of dollars, but most importantly, don't get the minerals out the ground. And that has a knock-on effect. If the minerals are not coming out of the ground, there are no jobs. If there's no jobs, there's no spend in the communities, there's no development infrastructure, and of course, government loses out at the end of the day because royalties are not paid and taxes are not paid. So it's very important to understand the people that you're dealing with, the stakeholders you're dealing with, the legal, the financial landscape. Very important.
So it sounds like with your clients, you're already helping them to at least navigate the landscape. And I like what you're saying about the need for a multidisciplinary team. And it's one thing that is often overlooked. And I do wonder, from your perspective, what sets you apart in the legal services landscape, particularly in the mining and the natural resources law space?
One of our key mantras or values is making sure that we understand the landscape and that we apply the law practically. It served us very, very well. For example, we've sat across the table from managers and been in the room with other practitioners, and they'll talk about, no, the roof. And you say, but we're at a platinum mine. You don't have a roof in a platinum mine. And you immediately lose credibility. And as soon as you lose credibility, you lose the trust of the client. If you lose the trust of the clients, they're going to go elsewhere. So we work very hard on the client trust by knowing what is happening in the industry. We're understanding the practical side of things, and then translating the law to suit practical circumstances is something we focus on significantly. We try not to stay in the office. We try to be at the mines as often as we can. One, because you meet the people and it's always better to look people in the face. Secondly, piece of machinery that you see in a picture is not the same piece of machinery on the ground. And just understanding that, and then understanding the working environment. When you try and you take a person who hasn't been to a mine and you take them underground for the first time, almost every single time they'll come up and say, I can't do this. And it is important to understand when you give that advice, it's not simply saying to a client, do X, Y, and Z. You need to understand what the consequences are. And where we can, our team members go in-house. So where members of the team can go on secondment to a mining company, we encourage that because you then get to learn about that dynamics in the client, which is different. It's also good, in addition to practical knowledge, to understand the dynamics and decision-making at a client. And we focus on that quite extensively.
In the 3 decades, can you maybe share a few examples of notable projects that Beech Veltman has been able to execute in support of your clients?
There's obviously negative work and positive work. Even labeling them is problematic. The negative work, you mentioned the incidents and accidents on mines. It's the most unpleasant process to go through for the team that's going through that. And we sit across the table from families who've lost loved ones. So unfortunately, we do represent a lot of the mining companies in the fatal inquiries, and unfortunately still way too many accidents. But that has to be done. And during that process, just adding a touch of humanity is vital. It's not just about the accident. They're family members, they are team members, but it is important to have a very strong touch of humanity and empathy throughout the process. There's always the exciting work, and everybody thinks it's exciting to do mergers and acquisitions, but we're not going to see those massive transactions in South Africa for some time now. I think the big ones, the spin-off of the Anglo-American assets, maybe one or two left there with the demergers, but the Anglo Gold Ashanti Harmony transactions, those big transactions are really few and far between. So the work that we really like focusing on at the moment is creating the opportunities. In other words, it's the smaller commercial transactions. It's where a single asset is being sold, a single mine, and we're doing a lot of those at the moment. Quite exciting to do the value chain, as you mentioned. So to get the financing offshore on a prepayment basis, put in place the loan agreement so that people can take the minerals out the ground, sell it, know it's going to a market and know they've been paid for it. Negative and positive. And what's our biggest pleasure in doing all of that work, if you can call it that, is holding hands and making sure at the end of the day that somebody comes out, and preferably everybody comes out, with benefiting through that process.
So I was reflecting on some of the negative experiences, and you realize that beyond the mining of these commodities are people. So when you do lose an employee, it's a lot more than just an employee or a number. It's really something that impacts families and communities. And sometimes we need to then go and engage with those families. And that's really when you truly understand the impact of ensuring that whatever you do from a risk mitigation or management perspective is really not just for show, but it has real impact on real people on the ground. Warren, as we start to close, I'm wondering, just reflecting on your experience, what's been maybe the one key lesson that you would like to share with mining executives today?
The first one, and we've touched on it, is perspective. Every single one of us are who we are today because of our experiences, but they're always going to be limited. So the person sitting next to you will always have a different experience and have a different perspective. So in other words, getting the right people around you. Any CEO that goes it alone is going to probably not reach their potential, or certainly not the operations. And then the second one is relationships. People underplay the relationships, but it is vital. It is the most amazing thing when you get a call to say something's happening and I need to speak to somebody at the Department of Mineral Resources, and for me to be able to pick up the phone and somebody at the DMPR takes my call. And it's because we spend a lot of time, and lawyers have a reputation. I can't say publicly what we are called, but most people who listen to this will understand what lawyers are typically called. It was certainly when I started practice. I try not to be that lawyer anymore because people need to be comfortable around you. They need to feel it's open and they can talk to you. And in that way, we are able to facilitate conversations and discussions with all stakeholders, whether it's trade unions or whether it's communities or whether it's a regulator or whether it's other mining companies, so that you don't work in silos. It's critical perspective and relationships.
There are many different ways you can practice law. One is the very transactional professional way. My personal experience of engaging and interacting with Beech Veltman and yourself has been the human element. And that is something that you don't find in, I assume, legal textbooks. There'll be people who will watch this and want to maybe reach out to Beech Veltman. What is the best way to get in touch with your team?
The best way is just to search for Beech Veltman. Everything will come up. Just search Beech Veltman and it will come up, and all the details will be there, whether, whichever search engine you prefer.
We'll definitely include the contact details, so you can go to the description and the details will be there. Mr. Warren Beech, I've really enjoyed this conversation. There was a time, say about 2 years ago or so, where we thought AI will replace legal practitioners. If you just listen to this episode, you realize that there are things you can prompt, but you're definitely not going to find the human element. In the AI world, you're also not going to find someone who's gone underground, experienced the pain of saying to a family, hey, your child or your husband is not coming home. There are just certain things that you cannot find. You do need to connect with legal practitioners who understand the human aspects of mining. Don't know if there's any last words, Warren, that you want to share with the viewers of Mining 901.
We often get asked the question by people, how do you get into mining law? And it's the same answer I give to anybody who wants to practice law. Generally, not even mining law. It is a frightening profession to be in. It hurts people. So if you want to get into mining or mining law, find a particular area of it and be passionate. If you're not passionate about law, you're not passionate about the mining industry, then it's not for you. The mining industry is a phenomenal industry, and the people that I've met over the years, the people that I've made friends with over the years, I had the most phenomenal accolade about 3 years ago. I was sitting in Rustenburg, and this very, very old gentleman came up to me after the meeting, and he said to me, Warren, I've known you for 30 years. You may not remember me. And he said, I've told my son, who's now in mining, that you are a lawyer, but you've got the heart of a miner. And you have to have the heart of a miner. Find your passion, find something that you really like about mining. And if you're going to get into it, have a very thick skin.
So to our viewers, you know where to find Beech Veltman. This has been a great conversation for me, and hopefully you found it as insightful as I have. Again, Warren, thank you for your time, and to Beech Veltman, may you enjoy many, many more years of service in the mining sector and beyond. Thank you for your time.